So I just kind of want to sum up, the day. We're going into a break, and then we're going to have a panel discussion, like I said, where we just kind of bring it all together and really think about next steps. And, we started with Peggy talking about this immense need for seed that we're nowhere near meeting, but all of the really impressive efforts towards developing those seed. And then we heard about, like, what does that look like on the ground with the botanic gardens that are helping with this work, from California Botanic Garden and the Seeds of Success program and rare plant conservation programs, right? And then we came back from lunch and we got into some nuances of how important that local genetics is. And then, Tom talked about climate change and how, that's adding another wrinkle into how we plan and do this work. And Antonio talked about how hard it is to grow these plants and to do it right and to do it well. And then Jenny took us home just talking about some of these regional partnerships and all the pieces of the puzzle. So I guess, I hope that we can kind of make a mental list of, like, okay, yes, check. We know biodiversity is important. We need native seed. It should be local. What are the challenges? We have kind of a lot of challenges. Like, one out of the gate that, I hadn't thought about recently was just, like, not enough botanists in these programs, like not enough of you doing this work, right? All of the technical challenges, all of the political challenges, and so many challenges. Let's kind of make a list of those and then say, okay, what can we do about it? And that's what the panel discussion is about. So please stop and think for a second, think over all of the talks and think about those big level questions. What we want is to leave feeling like, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I know how I can help. And here's our delightful panel of speakers ready to answer your questions, which we have carefully collated. And here's the first one. How do you thread the needle of mixing genetics from different populations to assist with plant migration and retaining novel genetics of those populations? Threading the needle.
Oh, okay, I'll give this a shot. So coming at this not necessarily from plants, but from just organisms in general, there's some research that suggests that you want to have a little bit, but not a ton when you're mixing in from another population. And the cutoff is usually somewhere between 10 and 20%. And if you go above that, then you might have a problem where you're swamping the local genetics with the new individuals that you're bringing in. So that's kind of a rule of thumb that's come out of a lot of different studies of different organisms, not only just plants.
I kind of want to add something to that, and that is that we were trying to, the data isn't there for us to really know what it is that we're doing for every species out there. And so ideally you'd want to have, the research behind it that kind of can help you with that for every species. But it takes a lot of money to do that, and it takes a lot of time, and we don't have either. And so it puts us, so I guess I would say we do it very carefully, and we try and find out on each species, if there's been anything done on it, and genetically. I'm thinking of empirical seed transfer zones, which that's what takes a long time to develop, versus what we're calling provisional, which is just, let's look at the temperature and the precipitation of where these things are, and then, guess. We're guessing with a lot of things right now.
I'll add one piece, which is if there's also research that shows that if you're going to add genetics from another population, is as a form of like genetic rescue, because the local population is depleted, then the genetic diversity in what you're adding matters. So highly diverse inoculation of genes is better than a low diversity. to basically spread greater diversity into the gene pool. It's intuitive, but it does seem to make greater viability of the populations that result.
Good answers, y'all. Thank you. This one's for all speakers. What do you hope that early career botanists and the next generation bring to conservation work?
Stick-to-itiveness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. When I started out, the main thing I had that carried me through was just like pure passion and interest. And I think that is like the little nugget that everything else can build on, is just being ready to be a sponge and just I kind of like just blindly followed all the botanists and just said, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And I don't know, it worked for me. So, but I think that, yeah, passion can take you a lot of places, and just having that excitement and building that love for native plants.
I see that across you all that passion. It's awesome. Who's next?
I hope that people have fun with it, and I hope they don't get mad at what we did, right? Because we made a lot of mistakes, and yeah, don't hold what we didn't mean to make the mistakes, and we didn't. We're just trying our best.
True.
I'll throw out, bring new ideas, and all ideas are welcome. Bring different cultural perspectives, meld them into what we do. We've had a pretty strong tradition of Western science that could benefit from different ways of looking at the world. And I think we will be stronger the more eclectic our view becomes. So bring your whole selves.
Yeah, I would add energy for communication and advocacy, because we have to get as many people on board here as we can to get really these are local problems, but they're global problems, and we need major buy-in, not just from individuals, but from the entities to which we all kind of report, I suppose. And so we really need to get large-scale institutional buy-in so that this is just the norm when people are running for government or school boards or whatever, that caring about the planet is the default. And so I hope that we can continue to inject that energy into our communities.
Anything else to add? We can move on. What, if any, concerns do you have with for-profit growers?
I don't have any problem with anyone that's interested in growing what we need. If they're willing to work with us, talk with us, we're open for business.
I mean, whether for profit or not for profit, I think being mission driven is what's important. And I think so long as the company, the organization, no matter their particular business model, if they have biodiversity in mind, first and foremost, I think that's important. And I guess one different, nonprofits have a governing board and a mission and this sorts of things. And so that maybe instills more public trust. But I don't have any specific issues with any specific companies, but I would say being transparent and ensuring that you are not driven by the profit, but by the work would go a long way to instilling trust.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'll go further and say we absolutely need for-profit companies to grow seeds. The need for seed is so great that we can't be choosy about the business model. Of course, we want to work with groups that have integrity. I mean, I wouldn't want to work with a nonprofit that lacked integrity. So it's not about what your business model is. It's about bringing the ability to do quality work. And if they can do it at huge volume, then bring it on.
And the seeds will tell us if they're not good because they won't grow. And then you don't do business with that company next time, so their ability to give us good seed is ensured by what grows through this. And that's another part of infrastructure. We don't buy seed unless it's been tested and it's weed free and they say it's source identified. Then usually the state seed lab will test that and go make sure that that's where they got it from. So there are assurances out there that these seed companies have to abide by when the government's buying it. I don't know what other entities have, but
All right, thank you all. What are the major barriers to connecting the millions of people in the LA metropolitan area to native plants?
Oh, I can have a try at that one. I think that when I mentioned kind of recentering community engagement around this conservation horticulture idea, I think if, I've noticed local nurseries, for example, in LA, independent nurseries are starting to carry more natives or native seeds. I think if, going back to the for-profit, if some of the so-called big box places started, tapping into that a little more, that would help. And that's not to say that they would dominate the business for small nurseries or nonprofit nurseries, but that, they would bring it to the public a little more for those folks who, for all those 10 million people who buy all those landscape plants. Well, if they're headed down to the big box store on the weekend, maybe that's the first time they see a black sage plant. And so I think that would be a great place to start if we could get some of the folks at these types of companies to get interested in that.
Yeah, and I just kind of want to expand on what Jenny said, because what that is, it's a means of access to just even knowing that native plants exist. So I grew up in urban Los Angeles County, and I knew zero native plants until I was in college, literally zero. I didn't know what a buckwheat was. I didn't know what a monkey flower was, but I knew what a petunia was, and I knew what a marigold was. And so having those plants readily available, having them in public landscapes so that you know what a geranium is, but you also know what a monkey flower is. And you know that these are plants that are indigenous to this landscape that have, that don't have these intensive water. I just thought all plants needed to be watered all the time. I couldn't even fathom that there are plants that can survive off the rain that falls from the sky. And so to be so decoupled from the place from where you live is, it's a big disservice to the whole population. So just bringing it into those very public spaces is so important, because not everyone has a membership to the California Botanic Garden or the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. I didn't go to the Angeles National Forest. I didn't go to the beach that had, I went to the beach that was just sand. I didn't go to the beach that had, calistegia or various native plants Abronium meridema or whatever. So it's just making it so that it's actually physically a part of the landscape that everyone can touch. I think is so important.
Nice. Yeah, of course, please.
I think I'm lucky enough. I get to give free classes twice a month in Northeast LA. They're free propagation classes. So we give out seed and cuttings, and they're 2 hours long. And we've been doing that for a year and a half now. And I think just being consistent. And I remember the first Native Plant Society meeting I went to, right? I remember the first time that I came down to the museum in Santa Barbara when Jan Timber released her book on Chumash ethnobotany. I think whether 2 people or 100 people show up, just being consistent with your work, and just that people can find it. They might not make it that Tuesday, right? Maybe their house might have burned down, but maybe in a year they're going to come And I know like Naomi's work with like the summer internships, like that, I don't know if you guys still have them, but I mean, so many amazing people have come out of that, a few mediocre, I'm just kidding. But to keep those things going, right? To keep like, and I think we messed up because we didn't keep that native food symposium going. There's so much desire for that. But to keep doing what you're doing, just knowing that someone, you never know who's going to show up and whose life you could change, you know, when they're going to be ready to accept that.
Yeah, it takes time to build a community.
Yeah, the first time we had the reason I brought the classes up is the first time we had them, we had like 5 or 10 people there. We're doing one tomorrow. We have 80 people registered.
Wow.
And like people, like, I don't know where I'm going to get all those cuttings. I'm going to visit the garden right now. Verbena Delamina all day long. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Nice.
Can I tag one thing onto what Naomi said, which was very insightful? And I wanted to add that interpretive materials at those public spaces are going to be important. So, you know, maybe cultivating folks who like to donate money to things, you know, hey, this is going to help further this cause. And that, you know, can go hand in hand with Antonio's great point about consistency and available activities that are free and accessible is having that interpretive material to accompany the native plants.
So I want to add something to that because your taxpayer dollars are at work. And so, you know, federal government agencies do a lot of interpretation of a lot of different things. And we've definitely got native plants, which is, you know, like a junior ranger. That's our version of that. But it's in English and it's in Spanish, which is perfect for Southern California. There's also things that, I mean, just go online and or go to your local federal government agency because there is free material out there for you. And I brought some of it, and I don't know if it's at the garden or where it is, but you know, there is material out there that you can use. You can get free of charge. You can give it to the students. I mean, you can contact me if you've got, I don't know what. Oh, wait. We also paid for a high school curriculum on native plants, done by the Institute for Applied Ecology, and yeah, Project Botany.
I don't know how to work.
Sorry, here go. Project Botany.
Oh, it's called Project Botany. Yeah. Finally got the mic to work. You can acquire it online. You can even download it for free if you want, or buy a copy.
Nice. Yeah. Naomi and Antonio.
No, I had a very insightful experience last year. So every year I go back to my high school. Love went to high school. What's up? Anyone here? All right. So I go to my high school each year to talk on career day, and I'm like I'm the scientist. It's really fun. And I, you know, it's really important for me to do that, to remember what it's like to not know. And I asked the class if they'd ever heard of the word super bloom. I thought because it's in the news.
Yeah.
Nobody never heard the word super bloom. I get a little emotional because it just reminds me that it's so important to recognize that barrier to access. That if you're not reading the New York Times or the LA Times, you're not going to the zoos, you're not going to the Botanic Gardens. Your world is the urban environment, or from school, from home to school, or whatever. Like, some of these things don't reach you, and you know, Title I schools are probably not going to incorporate, you know, a botany curriculum into this. They're just not. And so that's why, yeah, I don't know, just like having it become permeable and just such a part of the environment is so important. That people are walking down the street and like can literally touch a white sage. And you know, it becomes, to be able to smell a white sage, to be able to have it become a part of your home environment is, you know, it builds those memories. And so there should be white sage on all the streets. Why do we not have it? But So maybe it's like also talking to cities and figuring out how maybe I as a professional can go, La Fuente, okay, there is a mural now in La Fuente that has like native plants in it. I need to go visit this mural. It's this incredible artist who I follow online, and they do incredible work. But it's like public art projects or these sorts of things, and parks that can incorporate native plants that I think will really seep into people's lives in a tangible way.
Good point, Naomi, and thanks for doing that. This is related. This next one is for Jenny. If a person or organization wanted to replicate the Theodore Payne Foundation's local seed initiative in their own community, where would you recommend they start? First steps, especially.
Great question, because I suppose that would be a good goal, is to have locally sourced plants, available more regionally specific. And, the first thing that I did was I started building relationships. I reached out to civic people in civic offices. I picked up the phone. I said, "Hey, this is what we're thinking about. What do you think? Is there someone you could refer me to?" To just start from square one. There's definitely no, magical way to make it all happen. But I think that building the relationships that are going to be the foundation of enabling you to do that work, and it kind of feeds into, what you were saying, Naomi, about having people say, "Oh, locally sourced plants, that's interesting. Let me talk to my colleague or my supervisor," and kind of, because you're right, a lot of people haven't even considered that. So I don't know if that's a very helpful answer, but I think it's a square one to start. And then I would also say, to know and again love your area. Understand what the natural areas are, or the remnant, plant assemblages are in your area. Get out there, walk around. Know if there are native gardens in your area. Look around, drive around. Ooh, a native garden, interesting. That block only has one. Just kind of being aware and being on the ground of what's around you in both of those contexts can help build out, what might be, what might be feasible to build. But I think that I'm glad someone asked that, because I think it's a wonderful goal.
Yeah, please. Do you want to come speak into the microphone? Yeah.
So I can speak because I did it. And help. I started at the farmer's market. I started with a little hoop house with PVC pipes, and I built some tables, and I went to the farmer's market. And so you instantly have a community. It's already there. And it's a community of people who want to support local projects and local initiatives. And it's just a great way. You don't have to, suddenly have a successful business. You can do like one market in your local, wherever you are. And just start planting seeds. And
Nice. Great point. Thank you.
Denise, can I answer that?
Yeah, please.
Don't know. Go ahead. Were you gonna? Yeah. What was the question? What?
Starting a local seed initiative.
Oh yeah. Man, we used to have a native plant nursery in Ventura, Nopalito. Me and my cousin and a real good friend, and we focused on native plants. And my grandma, rest in peace, I love my grandma. In El Rio and Oxnard, we could never get her to plant native plants.
Yeah.
Rosales, like roses, grass, and this is kind of weird. This Monday for El Rio, me and my cousin are going to get together, and we're going to form an El Rio plant palette. We're working with this nonprofit that's kind of clean up the graffiti and planting native plants in the neighborhood. And the plant palette's going to be half non-native. Because we have to work with our people, and sometimes we're used to what we're used to. So we have this rule that it's not going to be anything invasive. everything low water that's going to be non-native, but to always be a push or a focus on native plants, but to be willing to work with, a lot of us want 100% native, to be willing to work with your people, right? The 18 million people that,
Yep.
yeah.
That's a good point. All right. Well,
Can I add one thing else? Because I was going to mention it in my talk, but you reminded me of it because I think, we do need to think outside the box. We don't need to think like you're going to just have a business. But if all of us thought about the farm to table scenario that they've done for food, it's local, it's grown local, it goes local, you're eating local. I think that you could have something like that in terms of if you want to model, let's look at what USDA did for farm to table and see if we can do that on a national level. But you don't have to do it on a national level, you do it on your local level. So I was going to go look into that with USDA when I retire.
all right. Switching gears a little bit. This one's for Antonio. From your perspective, how much of the responsibility for preventing the introduction of non-native plants should fall on the horticulture trade?
A lot.
Is there another, is,
He brought it in too.
is there another Antonio on this? God.
You can pass it to a friend.
We live in this, my boy, he's 12 and we have these arguments about socialism and capitalism and all that. We got to pay rent. And can you blame someone for finding a way to make money and not knowing it's a beautiful plant? And back where I come from, and maybe from Mexico, from Canada, Brazil, wherever, and like this plant goes beautiful, I'm going to introduce it here. That's so hard, Denise. That's a rough question. I think where we can take responsibility is where if we know maybe that genus, maybe a plant similar to this, once we know, then I think we should be responsible. There's a lot of big box stores that rhyme with maybe Gnome Depot or Rose, that they know what's invasive. We know, right? And if they don't, then it's being slightly ignorant. Those should be held accountable. But there's stuff like a new plant that I can't blame people for trying. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's hard.
I can blame
want to
people.
throw in. Oh, go
sorry.
ahead, Neil.
I mean, there's like commercial endeavors, right, to bring in non-native plants, but there's also been whole government projects that have introduced non-native species into ecosystems. Spanish broom. I live. Yeah, at the Forest Service, if you go up on our Forest Service lands, you will see all the roads lined beautiful golden with Spanish broom. And these were planted as part of beautification projects. And so there has been a history in California of rejecting the native diversity in favor of these non-native plants for quote unquote beautification projects. And one of my local parks, which is a county park, they did a whole planning project to put in eucalyptus and these are government dollars spent to eradicate native plants in favor of non-native plants. And yeah, so I guess there's the combined sort of commercial endeavors combined with unfortunate poor decisions on behalf of governments that were poorly thought out and have led to rapid degradation of habitats. Sorry.
So maybe we in the general public can hold folks accountable and help educate and maybe, stop that kind of practice. Anybody else? All right, this is a long one. Ready? Often, extant populations are located on public lands managed by agencies that have written policies restricting them from sharing seeds with others, especially for-profit companies. In light of these policy constraints, how can seed partnerships encourage and facilitate wider sharing of and access to seeds? Thank you, Matthew Major Online.
The government people that's up here, so I guess I'll answer. Yeah. There are permits, so you have to get a permit You can get a commercial permit if you're a commercial entity. If you're a researcher, you get a research permit. And every agency is different. So if you're looking for something on Park Service lands, that might be very different. Their permitting system is going to be very different than Bureau of Land Management or Forest Service or, some of the more multiple use agencies other than recreation for Park Service. But there are ways to get the seeds. You just need to go in and ask what the permit is for that agency. So go online.
Nice.
In my experience, some of this comes down to the individuals you're working with at the agencies and how they interpret policy. And that changes with changes in staff, and that makes it inconsistent. When we work with state agencies that own state land and we ask for a permit to collect seeds, to get the seeds in production, sometimes they say yes, and then and sometimes they reverse that as people change. So that's very frustrating. And I think it has to do with building relationships with the people you work with and bringing in all the right stakeholders and the right levels of decision makers in the organization you're working with.
Okay, this one's for Naomi and Heather. What seeds are on the top of your seed wish list out of the 71/2 left?
So it gets harder and harder. As you chip away, you get the low hanging fruit, and then the 71 are the hardest seeds to bank. And some of them the populations are really small. So for instance, Bocara yorkii, which is a narrow endemic in Death Valley National Park, the populations are 2. There's 2 individuals in the population. And it's how do you seed bank that? But on my wish list is the Amargosa nightwort, which we consider an exceptional species because that's basically saying it's a very difficult and it doesn't want to produce any seed. And so that's on my major wish list because I would love to have seed collected for that species because we'd love to do a restoration to support that species, but it's not telling us its secrets.
Yeah, I think that when you do this long enough, you have some white whales that you've been trying to get for a long time. I don't know if Sean is still here, but yeah, we have a small mustard. I apologize for my lack of knowledge of common names. It's a little Draba incrusata that grows in the Sweetwater Mountains right at the California-Nevada border. You have to do some really rugged off-roading to get there, and we did, and we found it, and all the seeds had already dropped, and that was just a heartache. And then we had, years of extreme rain that made it impossible to get back there, and then years of drought when you're it's not going to be up in a way I can collect it. So we're hoping that this is our year. They've had sort of medium rain in the Eastern Sierra. We'll see how it goes. But if we're thinking about things that are sort of maybe impossible, I would like to see a future where the island barberry is making seeds in the wild, because that's another one where right now there are, about 10 genetic individuals in the whole world. They don't make seed. All the recovery work we're trying to do is with cuttings. And I would love to see a future where our work is successful such that we have wild produced seeds to collect. And that would feel like a really big win to me.
Cool. Yeah. Please, yeah. Carol.
So in that case, when you're doing vegetative propagation, are you considering tissue culture?
So the question was, in that case, when you're doing vegetative propagation, are you considering tissue culture?
Yes. So we started out just trying to do traditional propagation by cuttings and had a lot of challenges to that. And as of about 24 hours ago, finally have a signed contract on a project that many of my island partners and I have been thinking about for a decade. And we're going to work with the Huntington Garden to do tissue culture for this species. And we're really hoping that this helps get us over that hump of really making a difference for this plant. So yeah, tissue culture is an excellent tool that we're excited to try to develop for this species.
It is. Okay, this one's for Peggy. You mentioned the importance of genetically appropriate seeds. Do you see a need for our definition of native plants to change to encompass locally adapted, to only encompass locally adapted plants? Oh, wow.
Are you asking if we would only use what's changing again? I'm not sure I understood the question.
Yeah, so do you see a need for our definition of native plants to change to only encompass locally adapted plants?
Oh, okay.
Denise, it's 3:45.
Thank you.
Oh, I don't have to answer?
No, we have 5 minutes left.
No, I think that we don't have enough right now of those locally the source identified plants. I don't know that we would ever get to the point where we were only using locally adapted because we don't have them. We're having fires, then are having floods because if you don't put anything down afterwards, you're going to end up with mudslides and people losing their houses, like what's been happening in North Carolina and other places. So unless we really get on top of this and we all partner together and we can really build this, wealth of native locally sourced seed, I think we need to always have the provenance of where the seed came from when we're using it, but I don't know that we're always going to be that lucky to have it. And until we do, I mean, our policy says that we will use natives, and it says locally adapted or locally genetically appropriate, but that's with a big caveat that if it's not available, we'll use a cultivar or something else. So.
Let's have another good. Okay, so this is a fun one for all speakers. What's your favorite term or vocabulary word related to seed structure? Did you say rabbit hole?
Radical.
Oh, radical. Nice. Do you want to describe what that is? All right, rapid fire.
Well, Antonio has a joke about something about a seed playing baseball. And I remember he told me this joke and he was like, look at that scientific term I threw in. So maybe you could tell that joke.
What was it? Oh, yeah, the seed is, this is a long joke. This is a 2023 season of the LA Dodgers. They were playing the Anaheim Angels, and there was a seed on first base, and he got thrown out because he got caught a lead in. Is that what it's that's bad. Oh man.
It wasn't a good joke, but then Antonio was like, caught a lead in. Like, I got those scientific terms.
I've got a word. It's the funiculus. It sounds like some evil demon, but it's not. It's the seed's umbilical cord. It's what attaches the seed to the placenta in the fruit, or not ovary. Sorry, botanist.
I'm at a disadvantage not being a botanist. I like the wings on the seeds, but I don't know if they have a special term.
Some do. Some are just called wings.
Wings.
Okay, so we have just a couple minutes left, and I'm going to end with this bigger question. That was fun. Do you feel like there needs to be a shift in the efforts towards protecting whole networks of native species versus individual species? And how might conservation make adjustments? Are there any success stories that come to mind? So that's big.
Well, sure. When we're doing restoration, we're restoring prairies that have many species from the same prairies in them, so they look like that. And this gets at sort of the whole schools of thought in ecology of do communities, are they sort of like organisms that travel together, all these species, or is it just a new assemblage of species wherever you go? And mostly it's the latter in reality. But you get consistency because the habitats support the same kinds of species. So what should we be doing when we're doing restoration? And I think we do kind of a little of both. We try to represent the entire community, but we also recognize that some habitats or some soil types aren't going to actually be able to support every species, and that there are other species we need to bring in. Maybe it's a little drier. But we also want to be thinking of the entire, say, pollinator community, and how are the species we're planting, the diversity, going to help the diversity of pollinators out there. And so we've been doing a lot of research to look at what are the pollinator networks, what pollinators go with which plants, and if we want this plant to get pollinated, what other plant species do we need to pollinate or to have out there so the whole pollinator community is supported. So, this is, it's complicated. It's ecology, and there's a lot of moving parts. And so I think I'll say it again, I think in practice, we do a little of both. We try to go for the whole community, but we have to be flexible about that.
Yeah, I think to me the answer is unequivocally yes. We need to protect whole communities. I think that as someone who focuses on rare plants and is largely funded by grants and contracts, there's a real disconnect between what you're able to get funding for versus what you think the system actually needs. But I think in the case of rare plants, sometimes we can use them as an umbrella to help other parts of the community. And we do this at the garden, and I know other partners are doing this as well. And a good example is we have a project at Carrizo Plain with the Bureau of Land Management working on the California jewel flower. That's one species. We're really working in one protected area. But because we're focusing on this federally listed plant, we're able to do not only research to help that plant, but to think about its pollinator networks. This plant is also an important food source for the endangered giant kangaroo rat, which is eaten by the endangered San Joaquin kit fox. And so by, choosing this plant that is rare on the landscape, but important to its community, we're able to scale up and have larger impacts. So I think that we're all trying to finagle it in the ways that we can, but I know at the garden, we dream a lot about these sort of important and imperiled communities like coastal dune systems. And we'd love for someone to just give us carte blanche to help restore these dune systems, common and uncommon plants alike. But there's sort of a feasibility and funding aspect to it.
Yeah, as we worry about the future of the Endangered Species Act, it's probably good to remember that and to tell two friends that these rare species also are kind of indicators for communities. And when you save that community and critical habitat for that species, you are saving whole systems. And that's probably all we have time for. What a great day. Thank you all so much. I've been inspired. I've learned. I hope you all have too. Thanks everyone for joining us both here and online, and go forth and conserve.